we're going to cross-fertilize our ideas between the panel and the audience. So I see Mr. Surinder Borat-Patavari seems to have a question.
Well, I'll set the ball rolling. I guess when we started to talk about the organization of this conference, the idea was there should be more interaction. There should be less presentation. Of course, the time is always a limiting factor. And this has been the main theme. If you would see the agenda of this conference, there have been 2-3 panel organization as well. And I'll start with the question. So I think somebody has to start. And incidentally, what we decided, because we are late by half an hour, we are moving all the program by half an hour further. So still we have time. You don't have to look at the agenda, that look, we have only so much of time. The cultural program is for half an hour only, and we had a cushion for about 30 minutes in that, so we are moving everything by half an hour further. Well, my question is for the panelists, particularly Mr. Sanghvi. Is economy more important than environment, or the environment is more important than economy? This is something which is coming quite often in our mind. But somebody has to take a clue. Maybe I'll finish this. And while obviously sitting on this platform, for us, environment is more important than economy. But how do you convince the people, the audience, and particularly in the West world, not only it's for you, for the other panelists too, for the panelists from Belgium, from Bombay, from Jaipur and Holland. Jansma, I'm afraid you're from Holland, if I made a correct judgment. And so how do you convince somebody who is susceptible, who is not susceptible to our thoughts, that look, environment is more important than economy, but that doesn't digest well. So I'd like to hear your opinions.
I have a two-way answer for that. First, let's ask somebody, what is most important to you? And when you dig to it, for most people, with the exception of few great people sitting in front of me, they'll say life means my personal life is most important. Now, if I draw that graph, if we don't work on the environment, we won't have an economy. We need to educate people that if we don't work on the environment, we won't have an economy. Just imagine, in 20 or 25 or maybe 30 years, suppose if the water level was to go up by 3.5 feet, what will happen to India? Just think about it. India is a huge coastal plain. That's one way. Now I'll answer the question in a different way, like Anekant is always, there's a two-way of the answering. Right? Economy is also very important because we are now a part of it. Now to say that we can become, everybody will not become saints, that's a fact. So we have to look at how best to use technology to improve environment. And in many respects, just the way we engineers are extremely crazy of designing the most complex chip, given an opportunity, we'll be equally crazy to design the most good technology to make it economically viable. And I think if we attack this problem from both ways, I think that's the way out, because or else, we'll always postpone the problem to the next day.
We had actually done a project for the UN Convention on Biodiversity where the topic of the discussion was going green makes business sense. So somewhere probably to look at green options. Doctor? Yes, would you like to quickly run across and give the mic there to the gentleman at the back?
In the meantime,
Yes,
only a small thing, but the word ecology and the word economy.
Just 1 second, sir. If we can have those few comments before your question. Please.
Should I carry on?
Okay. The word ecology and the word economy come from the same source, from the Greek word oikos, and that means house. And ecology is the teaching, the intellectual understanding of our house. And economy should always be in harmony with the understanding. Economy is about our greed, it is about our financial means, it is about how we physically feel well and live on this earth. There should be no greed involved in economy. That is easier to say than to do. And if we see in ecology there is wisdom, the wisdom of the jiva. And that we should, as giants, always take into the back of our mind. If we are polluting, if we are destroying, if we are doing things that cause irreversible damage, if we are stimulating the bad moral qualities of human beings, then I would say please let economy do a step back and study ecology, what is the actual working of nature.
Thank you, Dr. Rudy. And yes, may we have your question, please?
Yes, my question was the environment and economy, both are most important. We have to say both, not one, either this or that should not happen. Thank you.
Thank you for that thought. And is there another question that we can take? Yes? Should we take the gentleman on the second row? Ladies, we have a few mics, so if you would like to circulate this one as well.
My question, or rather reference, is to Dr. Mali. We were very charmed to see your video presentation about the waste management of Bombay. With a heap, rather this hill of waste, you leveled it and made it a possible good ground. Good. This can be done by the government efforts with the help of scientists like you, but in long run, how can it continue to be managed like this without improvement of the people's habit, wherein I think the Anuvrat vows come in picture?
Thank you, a good question. The example of old garbage was shown to you, that if the old garbage can be managed, it is lot more easier to receive the fresh waste, apply the same biology of, first odor control, and second, to inoculate the bacteria, and whatever is the compostable fraction, that will become, biodegradable portion will become the compost, which will go back to the agriculture, which will protect the health of the soil, which is deteriorating at the rate of 3 lakh hectare per year in India during last 30 years. And our dependence on the chemical fertilizer will come down. And the third one, the ill effect of the chemical fertilizer on human health has to be controlled because of the continuing subsidy on the urea fertilizer, which sells at 5 rupees a kilo in India and 45 rupees a kilo in Africa. So 20,000, almost 20 rupees a kilo to 30 rupees a kilo is the subsidy government is bearing. The ill effect of the urea is excess urea when applied, and the wheat which is grown on that, it has excess urease. Urease is a chemical which causes lot of irritation in the human being. You fight human being fighting on the dinner table, and more so the Punjabis, because they eat more wheat which is fully saturated in the urea. So then you have the urea grown chemical fertilizer crop, then it attracts insect. So farmer applies more insecticide, so you are having lot of toxicity in your edibles. So this is a vicious cycle of a wrong farming practice. We need to apply holistic approach that receive the waste as it is. Don't insist on this camera photo session that I'll do segregation, I'll do it. In Belgium, they have 9 bin system. In India, our people do not have a place for keeping 1 bin. So forget, whatever waste is generated, it should be containerized, bagged, should be handed over to the door-to-door collection agency. It should move to the processing site within 2 hours' time, and there it is a treatment which is giving you compost, the textile, burning material, wood, diapers, sanitary napkin, juta, chappal, rag. All they are good burning material. They become the fuel pellet, which is replacement of the fossil fuel. Then is the plastic. Our friend in Belgium is doing that. Plastic, we were not talking much because there was scavenging. Now scavenging has come down. So plastic is 5% to 12%. Take 5% plastic. Recycle it to its logical end. 1 ton of the recycled plastic will give you 700 liters of the diesel. Now comes the construction debris. He mentioned about. Construction debris is nothing wrong. It is again can be conditioned and it becomes a fresh building material for at least paver block, our walls, low cost housing and other things. Then what else remains? Metal is taken away. Plastic is separated out. Biodegradable is going back to the farmer. The burning material is becoming the fuel. Only contaminants, basically the lipsticks, nail polish, the broken glass, they must be taken care, handed over separately and buried into the landfill. Thank you.
Wow, Dr. Mali, that was very dynamic.
Yeah.
We actually use worms to decompose 6-month cycle, yes, and then that becomes excellent fertilizer. This is a 40-day cycle, but 20-day cycle. But is it a chemically induced cycle? Completely biological. Completely biological, 20 days. Yes, the gentleman with the beard, please. May we have a
Shivani. Thank you very much. Very fascinating debate. As a professor of ethics, of course, I fully agree with this teaching, and that's our task to raise awareness about the values. But I think one experience we have during the last decades is that humanity learns especially from crises and catastrophes. So the waste management is a good example. The people start to cry when they start to get affected in health and so on. Water pollution, I was working on fair trade with Tirupur, and the people started to cry when they had to ship or to bring the drinking water with trucks because the textile industry polluted all the water. So that was the start for conversion of the textile industry. The same in Switzerland. 130 years ago, we decided, or the Swiss Parliament decided, the first sustainability forest law because of the catastrophes when they cut the hills of the Swiss mountains, the trees, and the floods came down. That's how the sustainability forest came in, where you have to replant a tree for each tree which is cut. So the question is, how can we learn from catastrophes? Because humankind is not always learning from catastrophes. That's a question to you. What would you recommend that we can use the catastrophes in order to learn and then improve? I really think catastrophes are also a kind of blessing, not only of disaster, if we learn the lesson from it.
So it's disaster management followed by protection implementation for the future.
Thank you. I thought I'd start off because immediately when you started your excellent question, I thought, yeah, it's indeed true. We learn and we acquire maybe new priorities when something bad happens, and then usually when something bad happens to us or to people near us. And I think the most important thing for us as a global whole to learn from these localized catastrophes would be to really work on a feeling of empathy, which I think is present in everyone, but should probably be brought out more. I mean, there's no reason why people in Belgium shouldn't be shocked into awareness about the effects of deforestation, even though the main bad things are happening somewhere else. There's no reason why in the Western Europe people should say, global warming, it's no problem. Although we know that people living nearer to the equator are actually daily experiencing problems with that. But maybe to work on that empathy, we should make these disasters a bit more visible, maybe through media, through education as well.
One more thing, what we need to understand for a sustainable ecology or environment is to learn from our practices. The very word Acharya Tulsi ji, those 3 leaves, the holy plant Tulsi, if it is kept, you can see that 6 feet distance, no mosquito will be there around. That is why the Tulsi plant is so holy, and the Acharya Tulsi's name is linked with that. So if you have a Tulsi plant, it is Tulsi leaf extract that repels the mosquitoes. Our traditional practice of garlanding the saints and other bigger people was to protect them from the bites of the insects when there was no light and nothing. And the leaves of the neem, leaves of the tulsi, also those 3, 4, 5 Ashoka tree, they all are repellent for the insect. Now you come, what do we need to put the biology into the place to have sustainable development without damaging the environment and not that much of iPhone type of thing. This whole thing of the digestion is carried out by, I'll give you one small example. People from America, they ask me why Indian people eat more chilies, red chilies. Within India, the Andhra person eats still more chilies. Within Andhra, the Guntur person eats almost like a vegetable, chilies. Why? Difficult to answer, but the answer lies then when you take the chilies and you are eating a starchy diet, lot of rice or sabudana in your fast, okay, starch needs to be digested from an enzyme known as amylase. When you take a green chili, bite it, your tongue's bud is stimulated. As a result, if your tongue can produce 1 gram of amylase enzyme, you can digest 20 kilogram rice in 2 hours time. So here is the biology. That biology is what we are using to bring down the municipal solid waste treatment cost. Today in Europe and America it is costing $80 a ton to treat 1 ton of waste. Here in India we are aiming to treat it in $8 a ton. That is what our gain. Thank you.
Fantastic. Acharya Abhijit Muniji is here with us, and I'd like to request him to please ask a question.
So it is not Acharya, but Muni Abhijit, who is willing to question. I have been listening to the panelists and I appreciate their efforts. Dr. Male, I appreciate him enough for his strenuous efforts and effective efforts in the pragmatic world, using his scientific knowledge and technology to remove this solid waste. Now I would like to question from a different perspective, which has never been questioned in the whole conference, that despite of the solid waste management, have you ever thought about the inner thought waste, which is creating these solid waste products in such a way that it is becoming a big and the biggest problem today? So have you ever thought about it? And I will like to address some issues or some practical concerns which we can make out in our day-to-day life, and even some scientific microbes may be there which are useful to cultivate this kind of things.
Thank you very much. It's a very brilliant question, sir. I say biology is at work. The solid waste generation is a part of human life because of whether we are vegetarian or non-vegetarian. The carbon is a source of energy for all of us. What we eat in a day is something like 70% carbohydrates, that is the cereals, 20% is the protein. For we vegetarian, it is all the pulses and legumes, and 10% is our fats and legumes to keep our bones moving. 5% is the minerals, which we are taking from these fruits and vegetables. Now, the holistic approach for the solid waste management, you got no problem. Please eat more, grow more. As long as Indian farmer is willing to grow fresh fruits and vegetable, and Indian housewife is willing to do cooking. We will always have 50 to 60% component of our city waste as the biodegradable solid waste. This biodegradable solid waste which is coming to the city, we are taking a part of that like orange juice, something like 30% extracted, 70% remains, which becomes a polluting substance in the city. Farmer in his ignorance, especially in Asia continent, is sending not only the fruits and vegetables, he is sending a lot of roots, some soil also to get more money, crops along with all the greens, and thereby he is depleting his fertility of the soil. Now if this situation continues, his soil fertility has degraded because he is applying only nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium as chemical fertilizer.
Dr. Mali,
Yeah.
I think that perhaps Muni Abhijit was talking about the spiritual waste and not the solid waste.
Spiritual waste, among the spiritual waste, I'll take along with the flowers also, okay? And also human body waste, okay? Human body waste is basically finding solution via the sewage system. It is promoting the algae, phytoplankton, which is eaten by the fish, and fish is eaten by the man. So the whole cycle of the spiritual waste is again recycled. Plant, animal, human being, we all part of one cycle only, provided there is a microbiology, biology in between. So if the good bacteria are released into the ponds, atmosphere, in the sewage, soak pit, they will take care of all the biodegradable component. Only 5% minerals will be remaining, which will be recycled.
Well, what I'm going to now do is I'm going to ask Dr. Jansman to please say a few words, because you had a presentation where you had a lot of esoteric imagery. And so perhaps the inner spirituality is something that you would be a master to point towards. The cleansing of the inner. Yes, Mr. Singhvi.
Let's talk about spirituality as I understand. Now, we talked about economy and environment. Now, let us also look at from the same way spirituality and environment. The stage at which one reaches the level of spirituality, please correct me if I'm wrong, is maybe 1 in 100. It's a little difficult for everybody to reach a stage of spirituality. And if I look at the spiritual practices across the world, there will be few people who are really spiritual. That means they've gone beyond the day-to-day life. And then there are thousands of people who follow tradition. Tradition is easy to follow. Spirituality is something which has to be driven, and I believe is something which you follow from inside. Tradition is something which many, many people follow. If we can, just an environment, make it a tradition, then the spiritual people will drive that tradition. If I look at Mahavir, he drove that tradition of spiritual. But if you look at his fundamental at the lowest level message, it was meant for everybody. Only some people can grow at that level where they can understand. So then the goal of the spiritual person is also to create traditions. Because you as a spiritual person are far more powerful than me as a layman. That's a fact. A Sadhu Maharaj, I mean, with all the due respects, if Acharya Tulsi says, you shall not do this, the entire sect of Therapanthi will not do that. So you can create a tradition if you are really spiritual. And we need only a spiritual person to create a tradition, because traditions can be very dangerous too. So you have to be doubly sure what traditions you are creating. I hope I answered your question.
Give us Anuvrat. Anuvrat means little small vratas. And it is the way to destroy the all evils Is it not right?
I'll like to re-explain what he was willing. He was willing to say that the principle of the Anuvrat, that is taking small vows, small pledges, small oaths, these determinations can change the core heart, the inner heart and inner waste management. He has just an opinion to say, a thought to say.
I can't, that is the reason I think it's so powerful, Anuvrat movement is so powerful because it allows everybody to bring about a change, because you can start with small things, simple thing. I will use one iPhone less. That itself is a very good tradition. If everybody says, I will only change an iPhone every 3 years and takes a vrat, that I will not do that. Itself is a small vrat in some respects, right? Now, the only point which I was making to answer your question was, even taking Anuvrats as a moment, a new Acharya, a new Sadhu comes back and says, let us now emphasize on this a little bit more, because it's still part of the same tradition. Then the entire sect follows. And if your sect is the most leading sect, other sects also follow it. See, if you look at certain good things which has happened in Jainism, it may have started from one Jain sect, but now all Jain sects follow it. And then slowly Hindus. Take vegetarianism. Vegetarianism is as an example. We Jains started it. The traditional Brahmanic tradition was non-vegetarian. The entire Brahmanic tradition became vegetarian because of influence. They never changed to Jains. They followed Brahmanic traditions. So an influence can be very powerful sometimes.
I think perhaps what Muni Suklal was saying was very much in continuous with what you said, which is that you were talking about creating the tradition, and he was saying the tradition does exist. So perhaps the awareness to follow those traditions that do exist also. Yes, and
well, my question is to the last speaker who said that we hear sometimes many of the critical voice coming that Jainism is not positive, or it's not much concern, and it has given extra emphasis on animal rights and plant kingdom rights. And the second point was that it is also not positive towards equity and equality aspect. Here I want to say that when we look to the Jain aspects, Jainism has given equal importance to the notion of equality and equity. In the world of economy, His Holiness Acharya Mahapragyaji, when he has talked on relative economics, he says that in the world of economy, every human being should have an equal right for the fulfillment of his basic necessities. But the doctrine of the principle of effort that Lord Mahavir has given, Purusharth, in that concern, he has said that it is not that all people will be equal in every respect. Yes, they should be equal in their basic requirements and needs. But the aspect of effort brings the differences in ones. So there is a notion of equality even positively accepted in Jainism, and there is an address to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that comment. When I made the slideshow, I thought, critical comments, but then again, as a researcher and as an academic, I felt, no, I have to include the fact that there are some people, also scholars, that have pointed out certain aspects of Jain doctrine mostly that might not be such a brilliant combo with the ecological idea. And indeed, when I read these critical voices, on one side, they do make sense, but mostly they are based on a part of a tradition, a part of a doctrine, and I, as being kind of more from a sociological point of view, I tend to see at what is happening today. And if you look at in the last decades and even centuries by now, if you look at all the good things that have happened, both from within the lay community and within the sadhu and sadhvi community, it cannot be denied that obviously there are definitely people going for equality. There are definitely people who make a real ecological interpretation of Jainism. But, well, as sometimes positive notes are just focused on one side of the coin, critical notes also tend to just focus on a sub-aspect of things. But thank you very much.
My question is again to you, madam. In
Thanks.
one of the, in your presentation, in one of the slides, you refer to two words, you know, and I will just recite them. One is biocentric, and the other was ecocentric. They were the views you were referring to with respect to Jainism. And immediately below that, you said the concept of Jiva and Ajiva. I'm sure you know what you probably meant, and that's what you gave a passing reference is about, you know, biocentric referring to Jiva and ecocentric referring to Ajiva. Is that what you meant?
Yeah,
then my question will be formulated.
It's a bit more complicated than that. So in the worldviews, you have the difference between the different worldviews, the different isms I used, is what you put in the center as the main actor in your worldview. In anthropocentrism, it is man that is ruling everything else and using everything else. In the biocentric idea, it's all living beings being put on more or less the same position. So it's really about interconnectedness. Human beings aren't more than other living creatures. Ecocentric is a bit more complicated than just Ajiva, because it's about ecosystems. To give an example, for example, in a desert, for example, the ecosystem would include jivas, meaning the animals, the plants, the very few water molecules that reside there, but also ajiva, also the rock and all of the non-living matter that surrounds them and to make up that ecosystem.
That is where my question starts.
Okay,
you know.
sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, you know, this might be a bit technical, but then we as Jains understand Jiva can never, I repeat, never become Ajiva and vice versa. When you are referring to Ajiva and you are referring to ecocentric or biocentric, to me both of them refer to Jiva. So is there no contradiction? That is my question to you. Thank you.
A contradiction between biocentric and ecocentric then?
No, see, what I want to, I'll make it simple. The question is, Jiva and Ajiva are non-complementary to each other. One cannot be another.
No.
In the presentation, as I have understood, I would like to be corrected if I have understood it the other way around, is whether the ecocentric is what we have referred to Ajiva. That's all my question, to make it simple.
Ah, yeah, okay. So, yeah, indeed, you made the right interpretation, but it is both the biocentric and the ecocentric are approaches of ecology, but indeed, Jiva is not Ajiva, though in the ecocentric worldview, one would argue that in a certain place, the Jivas need the present Ajivas to function. Thanks.
Well, I think we'll reach the last question, after which I'll ask Muni Suklalji to please say a few concluding remarks. So we'll take one quick last question. Yes?
Thank you so much for the panel, especially this panel is focused on ecology. So my question is going to be from the wider perspective. Water is considered next generation of war, as we all aware of that. But at the same time, we have a tendency not to see our potential in terms of Earth, since we do have 70% of the Earth with ocean. So in that context, what are the visions or connections in terms of today's everything and anything we use, including iPhone and any energy production, everything consumes tons of water since we have very limited water. So what is the ideas, visions to extract water for drinking, for agriculture, for any other means from the ocean? And within the larger context, what are the connections or the ideas, solution in India within the Anuvrat philosophy and practices, in particular within the context of economy, renewable energy sources. What are those? How you connect this? Because we are talking about here ecology. Ecology cannot be separated if we are not incorporating the ideas and projects and then as a solution, mixed energy, renewable energy. And then I think I have a last question to the engineer. You mentioned really it's a remarkable project. I hope that it's gonna, reach out globally. And there are also larger projects and programs for the waste to energy. And you mentioned as a scale or a spectrum in it, but it didn't come out as a sector. So that's also could be as part of the circular economy. This is one of the general contexts. So if India has, within your program, a program, waste to energy as another source of energy. Thank you so much.
The last question, which is for me, I'll reply you, that we have an approach for integrated solution for the municipal waste, which I told you is 65 million metric ton per year. Out of this 65 million metric ton per year, something like 35 million metric ton is not a suitable material for energy, like our eatables and other thing. In order to get 1 calorie energy, you will be spending 2 calorie energy to recover it. So our holistic program says whatever is easily compostable, that must be composted at the lowest possible cost so that it goes back to the farmer and you get back your organically produced food. Now our new emerging waste, which is because of the new corporate culture and throwing away a lot of other things which are high calorific materials, they are good for burning. They are something like 20% of our total waste. So out of 65 million ton, something around 15 million metric ton is this burning waste, which has good potential for energy recovery. So our projects in the larger cities, they do accommodate if there are 3 compost plant, 1 waste to energy plant, and 1 plastic to fuel plant, and 1 debris to eco-brick plant. So that's our approach. And on the recycling of the water, water is a scarce commodity. That what is now the program here is to make use of all that water which is getting lost. Water once used is not a spoiled product. So whatever is coming out from our household, it is 80% of that going into the drain, again joining the sea. So there is a program to tap it all, recycle it through agriculture, forestry, and greenification, maybe floriculture, so that water table is discharged, bacterial purification happens, groundwater level goes up, and we will be better off in terms of water.
I think there are no takers for part 2, so we're going to head to part 2 of the session, or part 3, or part 4, part 10. The part doesn't matter. The part that matters is that we take some matter from here with us. And to just conclude and say a few remarks on this session and the relevance of what came out of it, I'm going to ask Muni Suklalji Swami, Anuvrat Prajapati, Shashan Sri Suklalji Swami to please say a few words. He is incidentally 84 years old and is able to continue his journeys, and we are so happy to have him here for the Chaturmas celebration. He's written 60 books, and he took initiation into, he was initiated as a monk at the age of 14. So that is 70 years of dedication to Jainism.
Excuse me that I cannot frankly speak in English, but as I heard in this conference, I am putting some solution points about environment. My first point is display of fireworks at the occasion of marriage, function, festivals should be avoided. शादियों में, उत्सवों में और अन्य कार्यों में आतिशबाजी का प्रचलन कम किया जाए. दूसरी बात, unnecessary lighting in marriage functions should be avoided. शादियों में और दूसरे फंक्शनों में जो बेहद लाइटिंग की जाती है उसको कम किया जाए. तीसरा पॉइंट, नेसेसरी यूजिंग ऑफ फ्लावर्स इन मैरिज एंड फंक्शंस शुड बी अवॉइड. शादियों में और अन्य फंक्शनों में जो फूलों का बेहद उपयोग किया जाता है उसको कम किया जाए तो हम एनवायरनमेंट को और ज़्यादा स्वच्छ बना सकते हैं. इन संक्षेप में मैंने अपने ये विचार प्रकट किए हैं.
ओम अरहम. आपके विचार, आपकी जो सोच है हमारे साथ बांटने के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. Because there are simple things as international delegates here, you may not realize the relevance of it, but weddings here are a big, huge affair. The flower arrangements go into multiple fields being removed and used for the purpose. So when he's saying don't use elaborate flower arrangements, or he's saying, do things simply, fireworks, oh, if you're here during Diwali, you'll understand what happens. You can't breathe at that time. So it's really very, very nice to have those words. And now I'd like to request Abhijit Muni to please say a few words and also give us some more ideas from his perspective. He was born in 1986 and he completed his high school education in Indore in science and mathematics. After his initiation in 2003, he continued his studies in Jainism, comparative religion and philosophy with learning Oriental languages at the same time. Sanskrit and Prakrit are his areas of specialization. He completed his graduation and presently is preparing for his PhD.
Shining sun of the spiritual sky, His Holiness Acharya Sri Mahashamanji, I pay my obeisance to him. Most Reverend Muni Sri Sukhlalji Swami and the colleague monks and the scholars and the dignitaries on the dais, panelists and the philosophers, thinkers and people from different walks of life, different streams, and the convener of the function. What excellent conference in which we are participating, and it's time for the conclusive remarks. And I know the scarcity of time, because time is a big constraint, and so I will like to speak a few words in front of you. There are two words which we all know probably, boost and burst. I will like to have a question. All the participants know these two words. Am I right? Boost and burst. Boost is a very positive word, a very positive emotion. And burst is the most negative emotion. In the odd conditions, which are extremely odd, and we get in panic and we are burst. And in conditions which are completely even, and we are in a pacified state and we reach to the state of boost. So out of you, who are them who come across this kind of cycle of burst twice a week or more? Will raise their hand. The ones who have this phenomena of burst, means they get angry or they go on speaking like anything to anyone at times, if they don't hesitate to speak and say. So whom of you are there who have this kind of phenomena twice a week or more? They can raise their hands. Some people are doing like this, I think they are raising their hand, but they are feeling shy that they should raise or not. But they are true to that extent at least. But some of them are having their hands in the pockets as they are fixed with that. But maybe it is very good if they have the rarest things of this kind. Now I like to question the opposite. Boost. How many of you have the power of boost twice a week or more? The hands are being raised. So what a positive audience. Very nice. So giving Om Aram for all of them. Om Aram for both. One who have realized and accepted that they have the burst phenomena, and one for them who have this powerful boost system. Now, whom of you would wish that we should always have, evenly have the power of boost? Whom of you wish that we should remain in the power of boost? They will raise their hand. I see some hands are being raised, means some of them are understanding my point. If they are not raising their hands, they are not getting my point. So then, if it is going in the brain, they will raise their hand. If it is going in vein, they will not raise their hand. So again, I like to question, whom of you wish that they reach the power of boost? They will raise their hands. Most of them have raised. Very nice. Om Aram again. Now two feelings that we come across. Sad and glad. Whom of you become sad in uneven circumstances, in some disturbances, once a month? Because you are very positive people, I think so. So being sad once a month. Whom of you? Very nice. They are too friendly to me. And the power of being glad once a month or more? Many. So many positive people over here. I feel glad of their gladness. A very short story with a very single sentence, and the question appears to you. And you all should be ready for the answer, because I can question anybody out of you. It is not that who wishes to answer, but whom I wish to question. Are you all ready for that? For sure? If you are ready, say Om or Hum. Okay, you are ready then. Friendliness and love. These both were the companions, and they were willing to have a race. In athletic race, we see a race. So these friendliness on one hand, love on the other hand. They both were having the race. I question you, who will win? Friendliness will win or love will win? Yes? I will not question whom of you, but all should be ready. Right? So in the panelist, I will like to question. Dr. Male has answered a lot of questions wonderfully. So I will like to question him. That please answer my question, that who will win, friendliness or love? He says love. Love will win. Now the second answer will be from this dice. Yes. Yes? Both. Nice. The third option. Now who is in favor of friendliness? They will raise their hand. Okay, there is one guy in friendliness. Now out of the whole audience, I will like to question all of you together, and all of you have to answer at once. No man should be there who has not raised the hand. In the three options, in the four options. First, A is friendliness. Be careful, listen carefully. A is friendliness, B is love, third is both, and fourth is no one. So who is in A? A. Okay. 2, 3, 4. Okay. And now who is in love? In love means who is in favor of love, that love will win. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it is more than that. Who is in the favor that both will win? Some of them are there turning their hands on in both answers. Good. And the fourth, who says that no one will win? Okay. There are some good persons whose answer, according to me, is completely right. The answer is no one. So whoever has raised or thought even that no one will win, I give a Om Arham from my side. And you all can also share with me Om Arham. Okay. Now the reasoning, because the panelists are very scientific, and you are also very philosophical and thinker mind. So I would like to share a kind of equation, how it moves. What we mean by friendliness. Where there is friendliness, there is an agreement. There is an samjhota. An agreement is made, okay, we both are together. Because we have the friendliness. So the friendliness makes an agreement with love that we are friendly now. The second one, love comes. He says that where there is love, there is sacrifice. I sacrifice for you. So he said, I don't want to win, I sacrifice for you. He said, we are in agreement, I don't want to win. So both of them are the losers, or both of them wed each other, both of them have the mutual interaction and interrelation and interdependence model. So here I wish to say that the discussion which was going on ecology and economics. So I will say ecology versus economics, no. Who will win? No one will win. Because if ecology is not balanced, economics will not sustain. And if economics is not ethical, ecology will not be able to be maintained. If you don't have money, if you don't have things, you cannot arrange all these things and do these things. So we have to manage both, we have to balance both, and so the model is ecology weds economy, and so we can say eco-friendly economics. So if that kind of model is developed, where that is eco-friendly economics, and that is to be cultivated by the power of wisdom. If the power of wisdom is activated, then we can cultivate these virtues and make the world the better place to live in, and can develop a happy, healthy and peaceful world order. Thank you very much. Om Arham.
Om Arham.